Hello there, everyone, and welcome to tonight's live stream on Cyclone Belal. This storm is currently in the southwest Indian Ocean and poses a significant threat to Mauritius, Reunion, and potentially even in the future, Rodrigues. So there's a lot to talk about tonight. There's a lot to watch. You can see the tropics overview on the screen. We have Belal again there in the southwest Indian Ocean near Madagascar, although only really rainfall is going to be the major impact for them. But damaging winds, significant wave heights, storm surge, as well as that flooding rainfall. All threats with Belal. Invest 98S also meandering out in the Indian Ocean. Not expected to be a huge impact to land, but could develop beyond 24 hours from now. I also have my team of two people with me. I have Elliot and Alfiria. Alfiria, an accredited weather documentary YouTuber, and Elliot, one of our tropical experts here at Advective Weather, as well as our sound specialist. Thank you both so much for joining me, and welcome to the stream.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to start by telling the viewers kind of what's going on with this storm. So firstly, this thing has winds of 70 knots, according to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center in the ATCF, with a pressure of 980 millibars. It's located at 18.1 degrees south, 53.5 degrees east, and the system is currently moving almost due south at this point, before it is going to make that eastward turn towards Reunion in particular. So on satellite, Elliot, I know this is something that you've been watching a lot and you've seen, but there are signs that this storm is rapidly intensifying right now. Can you go through what we're seeing right now that's leading us to that conclusion?
Oh yeah, definitely. So if you look at the loop of the infrared imagery, if you could pull that up really quick,
Yep, it's
we
up.
are seeing a large convective burst that's wrapping around the system. As you can see, some of those negative 80 degrees Celsius cloud tops, those are some very deep thunderstorms just ripping through that eastern side of the cyclone. And basically, that means that the eye wall is starting to strengthen quite a bit. As you can see, there's a bit of clearing out ahead of that convective burst. That means that there's a lot of subsidence ahead of that. It's not really an eye because it's not really at the center of the burst, although this generally is basically a sign that the clearing process is in its early stages and that the storm is indeed rapidly intensifying.
Yeah, so the expectation is that this storm is going to be well above that 70 knots or 80 miles per hour within the next 6 to 12 hours. And this is reflected in both the Joint Typhoon Warning Center and Meteo France forecasts. Here is the Meteo France forecast. Everyone can see it now, and the major thing to note is that by the time we get to a day from now, 24 hours from now, that's when Meteo France projects that this will become an intense tropical cyclone exceeding 165 kilometers an hour with very destructive winds. They currently forecast that this is going to make a very close approach, if not directly landfall of Reunion as a intense tropical cyclone. However, it should be noted while the center of that line does go straight through Reunion, that does not mean that that's where landfall is destined to occur. Anywhere within the cone is where the center of circulation could go. Impacts extend well outside of that. So if you're in Mauritius, even if this misses you, it doesn't make landfall. That does not mean that you're out of the woods for significant impacts. And for those in Rodrigues, even though you're about 5 days out currently in this cone, you are within the cone, even if on the northern fringes of it. So Reunion, Mauritius, and Rodrigues all need to be watching this very closely, but I would implore especially Reunion to be watching because regardless of where this goes within the cone, the southernmost track, the northernmost track, dead center, you're going to get significant impacts out of this. In Mauritius, if this takes the southernmost track, you're going to get out of a lot of it. You'll still get rainfall and maybe some high surf, but the winds won't be so bad. But if it takes the northernmost track or the central track, you're going to get significant winds alongside that. And then Rodrigues, this needs to go pretty much on the northern most part of this track in order to be of significance to you. But when it comes to confidence, I'm very confident that Reunion is going to get significant impacts out of this. I'm fairly confident that Mauritius is going to get significant impacts. And as for Rodrigues, I don't have much confidence either way right now. However, I would suggest that you watch your official agencies, Meteo France, as well as the Mauritius Meteorological Agency, closely. Elliot, Alfieri, anything to add to the Mateo France forecast with this?
So nothing on the Mateo France forecast end, but the Joint Typhoon Warning Center has issued their latest advisory. Thank you, Patrick's Weather Forecast, for pointing this out. And they are still holding a 105 knot peak intensity for the storm as it makes its closest passage near or over the island of La Réunion. And as we know, that this is basically equivalent to a Category 3. So pretty severe wind impacts are expected with this system as it makes its passage. Although the rainfall is something that we're also going to be looking at quite a bit as well over the next couple of days.
Yeah, for sure. So the Joint Typhoon Warning Center currently having the storm at that 70 knots we were talking about. That's 80 miles per hour, 1 minute sustained winds. So the actual wind speeds may sound a bit high for those of you in Mauritius who rely on 10-minute. Don't rely on that so much. Rely more on the categories we're talking about. But we have a Category 1 system, and we're expecting it to hold as a Category 1 for the next 12 hours. It's expected to be a Category 2 by the time we get 24 hours out, in about a day from now, so it's morning for you guys over there now. By tomorrow morning, that's when we're expecting tropical storm force winds to start moving ashore, particularly for Reunion. And then by the time we do get 36 hours out, so that's going to be a day and a half, so that's going to be tomorrow evening. That's when we see this thing peaking as a Category 3 system shortly before. Again, this is not good for Reunion, a forecast for a direct pass over Reunion in the center of the track. So for Reunion, at least, I would say that cyclone conditions are certainly plausible, if not likely, at this point. And at that point, Mauritius tomorrow night will start seeing more substantial wind impacts. Those winds will peak in about 2 days' time. So not tomorrow morning, but the morning after. That's when Mauritius is going to see the worst of things before things do improve with time. And then as for Rodrigues, the worst for you would be in about 4 to 5 days' time. We don't have exact timing for you just yet. But yeah, something I do notice that's in common between the Mateo France and Joint Typhoon Warning Center forecast is that if the track goes exactly as they plan, in both cases, Reunion has a very close approach with this storm, if not a direct landfall. So to Elliot and to Alfiria, what are your thoughts on that, and what do you think that folks in Reunion especially should do to prepare for this?
So I would say that if you're going to do preparation, today is the day to do it. You don't want to start preparations too late because, like, starting tomorrow, you're probably going to start seeing some of those gale force winds, and it might be too dangerous to really go out there, prepare for the storm, like get the supplies you need. So today is going to be the day that you want to get those. And if there are any evacuation orders in place for your area, we do want to make sure that you follow those. And if you're not sure whether you should evacuate or not, always be consulting your local officials. They're the ones that know your area the best, and they can help you the best as well. So those are my main two takeaways for this, I'd say.
Yeah. Alfiria, anything to add?
Not really, other than I'm pretty sure we're already seeing, at least with some of these convective bands, some of these outer bands that are kind of away from the main system itself that are already bringing in some rainfall
Hmm.
on the islands right now.
Yeah, and we'll take a look at radar here momentarily, and we'll be able to see how those convective bands are evolving and what those impacts look like. Um, Next thing I wanted to look at is some model data. So currently what I have is an ensemble. It's numerous different models merged into one graphic. This is an ensemble. This is the global forecast system ensemble. And the major thing to pay attention to is here is the areas where it is confident that we are going to be seeing a a tropical cyclone there. So your blues, your purples, those areas, those are the higher confidence tracks. Your yellows and oranges are the lower confidence tracks. So in the blues and purples, Reunion is in that dark, deep purple color, which again aligns with official forecasts. Mauritius, not as much, but still over 80% of the model members do show this thing being within 200 kilometers of Mauritius. So that is still substantiated, and that still needs to be taken extremely seriously. That's not something to scoff at. So near 100% for Reunion getting um, impacts with this storm having a 200-kilometer or closer pass, and I expect it will be much closer than that. Mauritius at 80%. So that's some data to look at. And the other data to look at is our intensity forecasts. So the Joint Typhoon Warning Center currently has this thing peaking as a mid-ranged Category 3. The weather models tend to show our HAFS and HWRF weather models, which are the two that I rely on the most. Those two show this peaking around the same, a little weaker, but both as Category 3s as well. Our statistical model, the SHIPS, also indicates that this will peak as a Category 3 system. The only one that doesn't is the GFS. That's the Global Forecast System. That's low resolution. It's also not ocean coupled. Not the best model for this. So every model that I'd say is somewhat reliable statistically and operationally all indicate that this will likely peak as a major storm, which is unfortunate for those in the path of this thing, Reunion, Mauritius. But by the time it gets to Rodrigues, the good news is that if it does make a close approach, it is expected to be weaker Category 1 or 2 status expected at that point. So any thoughts on model data? Any thoughts on kind of the way that our computer simulations are projecting this to go? Anything that the viewers should keep in mind with model biases or things to watch out for?
Yeah, definitely. So, Thomas, you did mention that the GFS is not an ocean coupled model. And one of the things that I've noticed consistently with the GFS run is that it doesn't really weaken it as much as the other models in general. And I think I mentioned this in my video update on earlier, but it keeps it fairly strong, even like well after it clears both Reunion and Mauritius, which is kind of unreasonable since at that point it's near the 26 Celsius isotherm, so upwelling is kind of likely to kick in at that point, I would think. So do keep in mind that the GFS might be a little bit not as aggressive on the weakening as it should be if you are looking at the models yourself and thinking, oh, this is going to be a really slow weakening storm and I should be like panicking. I mean, sure, like it's definitely going to be something to watch, but this isn't really going to be a situation where it just keeps its strength for long, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with that in general. I will say it's funny, though, that both the ships and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center kind of align with the GFS later in the run with the slower weakening trend relative to the HWRF and the HAFS, which have this thing weaken a lot more quickly. I'm actually more inclined to believe the HAFS and HWRF, but on the same token, I think that it is important to consider that this could weaken slower than expected, especially because we don't have the best observations out in this part of the world to know how the environment is. So for those in the path of this storm beyond Mauritius and Reunion, specifically Rodrigues, this certainly isn't a situation where you should let your guard down, regardless of what the forecasts say right now, just because you're well within an area where this system could impact you in the future. Next thing is alerts. So this is the current alerts in place for Reunion. We have an orange cyclone alert in place. I wish I had a better graphic than this one. I can zoom in on it at least for you so you can see it a little better. I wish I had the official Mateo France one, but their site has not been cooperating with us today. We suspect that a lot of that has to do with a lot of traffic because the people in Mauritius, Reunion, Rodrigues are checking to see what they think about this, which is good. We like that. We like it that people are looking at official sources, but it does make it difficult to access sometimes when the site gets overwhelmed. So here's the current alerts. Orange alert for Reunion at this time. That is their second highest classification, I believe, with their highest being red. I don't know if there's one higher than red. I don't believe so. And then beyond that, Mauritius has Class 1 cyclone warnings in place. There are no alerts in place for Reunion at the moment, but Class 1 cyclone warning is in place as a result of this cyclone. And good news, the Meteo France site does appear to be back up. So here, I'm going to load this in. And they do have a purple alert. So orange alert is actually a level 2 out of 4. So yellow is level 1, orange is level 2, red is level 3, and purple is level 4. Level 1 being a potential threat within days coming soon, over 24 hours out. Orange alert is danger within 24 hours. Red alert is imminent danger, and purple alert is exceptional danger. So we're currently at a level 2 out of 4. And here, I want to pull this up so that way you guys can see this a bit better. But there it is. So there's that orange alert in place for Reunion. And again, we're seeing that yellow pre-alert. We've already been through that phase. The orange alert is now where we're in because within 24 hours, that's when we're going to start to see more serious impacts. So the level of vigilance at an orange, that means you need to that means dangerous phenomena are going to be provided. Keep up to date with developments and follow the safety advice issued by the powers that are public. This is translated, so that's why the grammar seems a little weird, just because this is a French site. But that just means that you should follow the instructions from your public officials. Again, Mauritius in a Class 1 cyclone warning at this time. And Mauritius class system, let me see, I want to make sure I have this right. So class 1 is issued no less than 36 hours, no more than 48 hours out before the occurrence of wind gusts of 120 kilometers per hour. Class 2 is issued as to follow as far as possible 12 hours of daylight before the occurrences of gusts of 120 kilometers per hour. Class 3 is issued when you are within 6 hours before gusts of 120 kilometers per hour, and Class 4 is when gusts of 120 kilometers per hour are recorded in some places. So we might see upgrades to this just depending on how close this gets and if those gusts will occur. I suspect we will see those class upgrades with time, but that is a 4-class system, so both regions using a 1 to 4 scale. We're at a level 1 out of 4 in Mauritius, a level 2 out of 4 in Reunion, a level 0 out of 4 in Rodrigues. Well, if you guys have any sort of questions, comments, concerns, anything of that nature, please feel free to ask us and we'll be more than happy to answer, especially because here pretty soon we're going to be through the main just information giving part, and that's when we can start to interact with you more, talk more about the timing of this storm, the impacts of this storm, who it's going to hit. And something else that I'd like to request of all of you while you're here, please spread the word if you can to let people know that this cyclone is on the way. That is very important. So that way we can keep people safe and save lives.
Do kind of want to point out to the satellite imagery, or the trying to remember I believe the IR
Okay,
imagery.
I'm on it.
So when we got to talking at around, I'd say about 9:50 Eastern, up on my screen, it looked something.
Here, I can just get it up on my screen. I see what you got. Here, I'm on the frame.
Yeah, so it looked something like this. And in the past about half hour, it went from that to now, we're getting more colder cloud tops is trying to wrap around.
Yes. So I think that's indicative of what Elliot was talking about earlier with the potential for rapid intensification. So it's something that we are going to continue to watch with time here. as this serious situation continues. We do have a question in the chat here, and that question is, will you look at other weather than just this? If we have the time to, yes, it depends. This is primarily for Cyclone Belal, but we'll see how much extra time we have after that discussion ends. And if there is time and people do have questions about other weather, we'll be happy to talk about that. So that's where we're at the moment. Next thing I want to do is I want to go through a couple of model projections. The first one, this is the HAFS, and I have the simulated radar up a little bit just to kind of show you what to expect over the next little while. And I actually think that the parent is going to be better for this. So let me pull that up, see if I can show that. Sounds good. That's more winds. So yeah, let's go back. So we're seeing outer bands hitting Reunion and Mauritius at this time. Those outer bands will continue, but the core of the system will move ever closer. Now, winds are going to start to get stronger in Reunion here around the overnight hours tonight into tomorrow, before we start to see tomorrow morning the core of that system get quite close. So this is a day from now, and you'll see this model has the core making a very close approach to Reunion, and then making a direct landfall. Now, again, we don't know that, but unfortunately, everything I've been seeing so far has been indicating that this will at the very least be a close enough approach that Reunion will get the strongest winds that this cyclone has to offer. So unfortunately, this is likely to be a high impact event for those areas, but the worst of it will begin about a day from now, and the worst of it will end by the time we get to that evening. So from tomorrow morning to tomorrow evening, that's when the worst of this is going to be. Then rain is still going to continue for quite a while after that. However, the worst will have passed. The worst for Mauritius will have convective bands that have already been moving through, but the first big one is expected about a day from now, funny enough. And then we're expecting the closest approach to Mauritius to occur here, even if the winds aren't quite as strong throughout the overnight and perhaps early morning hours of tomorrow. So that's what we're seeing there. As we move farther and farther out, this model shows this going south of Rodrigues. However, that does not mean that Rodrigues should let their guard down. This thing hooks back north, which is the official forecast from Meteo France, and it's still rather robust, as it could head in the general direction of Rodrigues, but there's lots of uncertainty there. And here is another scenario. I'll paint this one out real quick of what could happen with this as well. So this is what we're seeing right now. And this system, of course, rain bands as well. But this also shows things starting to get particularly nasty throughout the overnight hours. The worst of things entering at the same time. So that's going to be about 24 hours from now. And unfortunately, this model also shows a pretty direct landfall on Reunion, if not moving just a hair south. And then the closest approach to Mauritius is going to be on this model about the following day from that, so 2 days from now. And then this model does not show, this model actually shows it looping back around. I don't actually believe that's going to happen at all, so I wouldn't be too worried about that solution. Elliot, any thoughts on the model solutions? Alfiria, either of you?
I personally think that these models, I mean, obviously we're seeing a pretty good consensus that this thing will pass either directly over or very close to the island of La Reunion, of course. I do think that landfall is the most likely scenario at this time, but honestly, it doesn't really make much of a difference impacts-wise whether this thing does make a direct landfall or not. You're still likely going to see at least a good portion of the eye wall impacting land. So I do think that that is one thing you have to consider with this storm, because especially if it doesn't directly make landfall, you're definitely not going to be in the clear. you're still going to get some very heavy rainfall and heavy winds. So the model spread that we're seeing now, while it's uncertain whether a direct landfall will occur, I would say it's pretty safe to say that with the spread we're seeing now, we're going to get some pretty significant impacts in La Réunion.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and that's unfortunate news for them. I think that they're going to get hit with some of the worst winds the system has to offer. So whatever the peak intensity is, or whatever the intensity is at the time of its closest approach, I think those very strongest winds will be pretty close to, if not directly over Reunion, which is very unfortunate. So hopefully things change. We'll just have to see. Next thing I want to go over and take a look at, we do have um, a chance for rapid intensification consensus. I want to kind of ignore the artificial intelligence driven stuff just because it's been wrong thus far and I anticipate it will be wrong again. However, our other rapid intensification consensus aids have been a bit better, and they show above an 80% chance of 35 knots in 24 hours, which is already concerning enough because that would land us in 105 knots, given current circumstances. But my bigger concern is that we have above a 50% chance of 45 knots in 36 hours, which lands us at 120 knots, or no, 115, which would make it a Category 4 equivalent system on approach to Reunion, pretty much as it's striking Reunion. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say that rainfall is also going to be a really big concern with this.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, I was looking at the latest GFS run, and a good chunk, if not all, of the island of La Réunion is forecast by that model to get at least 500 millimeters of rain. And knowing that the mountain is fairly mountainous, I mean, island is fairly mountainous, there is going to be a lot of topography-induced rainfall as well. So while most of the island is going to be getting at least a couple hundred millimeters of rain, you're likely going to see some even higher totals in those mountainous regions.
Absolutely agreed there. Um, let's see. So yeah, let's talk about just how much rainfall we can expect out of this thing. So that's an interesting thing to talk about. But over the next 5 days, I want to talk about these solutions here and just see what you think of them. So the European model is currently saying that St. Denis on a Reunion is going to get 220 millimeters of rainfall, with peak on the island being about 330 millimeters, 340. And then in Mauritius, the European model expects that we're going to get about 180 millimeters at peak. And then in Rodrigues, I don't think that it's really safe to be talking about rainfall yet, just because we're so far out. But for Mauritius and Reunion, nearly 200, if not over 200 millimeters of rain expected, and I wouldn't be shocked if we crack 300, given some of the solutions I'm seeing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And with this system, it's not necessarily a fast moving system. It's not necessarily slow moving, but it's still not very fast moving. And you're likely going to see several hours of very heavy rainfall, especially in that eye wall. And even those outer bands can, if they're positioned right, bring quite a bit of rainfall additionally to the islands, and especially in those mountainous regions, as I mentioned before. If you have air that's forced upwards, you can get a lot of topographically induced convection and rainfall from that.
Yeah,
So,
the GFS shows that we're going to get up to 400 millimeters of rain on Reunion, and far less rain in Mauritius, but still over 100 millimeters even in a best case. So I think that's a bit of a difference in track, but I think that that solution is also realistic. Regardless, I think flooding is going to be a big risk, and I think that we could see significantly more rain than that even in some places, that these models are just too low resolution to really iron out. We can actually take a look real quick at a couple of others and see what they think. um, with regard to this. Let's let's see. So in total accumulated precip is all said and done. I know there's a way to do this. Let's see. Maybe not. But graphically, it's clear to see that the HAFS is projecting well over 24 inches of rain, which is over
Yeah,
600 millimeters on
yeah,
Reunion,
it's
and the H Wharf is in the same boat as well. So I think it might be more accurate to think, especially because both of the higher resolution models are showing it that we're near 600, perhaps above 600 millimeters in some areas being the expectation.
oh yeah, that's definitely fair to say. And judging by past cyclones, like I wouldn't be surprised if like some of those mountainous regions, like you could get upwards of a meter of rainfall if you do get hit particularly badly by a band, especially one that sort of stalls out over your region,
Hmm.
which is possible with this storm motion vector, I would say.
Yeah, unfortunately so, especially because the storm is going to slow down over the next little bit as it takes that turn, and we're going to have rain striking throughout the entirety of that. Speaking of that, let's actually see what current conditions do look like in Reunion and Mauritius. And currently, we have thunderstorms over both. So a lot of these are enhanced by mountainous regions. We don't have anything quite as intense over water, but as soon as these little showers hit land, their radar returns just spike, um, which I'm sure isn't shocking. But it just shows that these mountains are really going to enhance rainfall because it is a physical boundary. So if you even have the slightest bit of rising motion, these mountains are going to force that to become much more substantial. You don't need much instability. You need just enough for the physical barrier of the mountain to do the rest of the work for you. And that's exactly what's happening. So unfortunately, I think we're already starting to see some of this more substantiated rainfall occur. And also, we're starting to see some of these true outer bands, if you will, from the system move forward. These much more connected arcs of storms move in the general direction of Reunion and Mauritius. So I wouldn't be
Yeah,
shocked to
now
see that continue.
now Thomas, if you're able to, would you be able to like pull up the radar velocities if it does have that, because I do think that it might be useful to see where the strongest winds are at the moment, just
Hmm.
to show people that now is basically the time you're going to have to prepare. Like these storms, they don't appear to be moving very quickly, so I wouldn't be surprised if the winds on the ground at this point aren't particularly strong, and you're
Mm.
probably going to want to get preparations underway as soon as you can because the winds are going to get stronger the longer you wait.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I'm able to pull up um, the Reunion radar for velocity. I'm not able to look at that product, but I can look at a modeled variant here of what the winds currently look like, the gusts, and currently, um, I mean, we've got wind gusts in this thing that are in this model 60 knots, but we know that's already higher, and we know that the outer fringes of tropical storm force winds are getting somewhat close. Let's see, how close is that closest point? Now, of course, models are not the best way of looking at it, but it's better than nothing. And currently, it's 110 kilometers away, those tropical storm force winds. So that's not far at all. So people in um, Mauritius and especially Reunion do need to be preparing for the system. And the way to do that, it's going to be to board up your windows and secure your doors so those don't fly open. You don't have debris flying around. Make sure that you know your safety plan. If you're more inland towards the center of the island and you think that winds are going to be a bigger issue, lowest level, sturdy building, interior room, it's going to be your best bet. If you think flooding is going to be a big issue, whether that's coastal, storm surge, rain related, flash flood, whatever it is, highest level of a sturdy building in the outermost parts of that building so that way you can escape if needed. That's going to be your best bet. In that scenario. So making sure you know about that, making sure you have enough food, water supplies, emergency kits, things like that, to make sure that in the event things do go south, you can treat people, you can survive for many days after the system. That's also going to be important. And I especially implore people in Reunion to do that. People in Mauritius, probably not a bad idea to do that either, but especially Reunion. People in
Right,
Reunion
and
need to
with
be good
that
on it.
flooding rainfall, you have, it's going to be unclear whether you're going to get a lot of roads washed out. You could see roads washed out that could make your area inaccessible for days on end, and you really don't want to be caught in a situation where you can't get out of the area you're in and you can't get access to supplies. So being sure to stock up for several days of supplies is key, especially if you live near that mountainous terrain where you're going to see that topographically enhanced rainfall.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I want to look at here real quick, it's the final scheduled thing on the list, if you will, before we'll go to a Q&A. I just want to look at the conditions this thing's in and what it's tracking into. So first is sea surface temperatures. And unfortunately, I mean, it's in 29 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures right now, and it's going to be in 28 to 29 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures until it hits Reunion. So I think that overall sea surface temperatures, even after it hits Reunion, are going to be sufficient to sustain a cyclone of some intensity, even though it might not be enough to sustain a major cyclone afterwards. But up to the point that it strikes Reunion, I think unfortunately sea surface temperatures are going to be good enough. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that, Thomas. I do think that these sea surface temperatures are definitely suitable to sustain maybe at least a category 1. If it rides sort of that northern edge, maybe a category 2, although I don't think it's going to keep as a category 3 for long after landfall, honestly.
I can
It
agree
all
with.
does depend on the track, though.
I do agree. I It all does depend because if it goes on the northern end of this, it's actually the worst case scenario because then Reunion still gets really bad impacts. Mauritius gets bad impacts. Rodrigues is now more under the line of fire, and it has warmer sea surface temperatures. So if we want anything, it's the storm goes farther and farther south. Just go south. So that's going to be the hope here. And of course, we'll keep you up to date with more live streams and video updates as we get closer to landfall. Next thing to look at is the wind shear the storm is currently experiencing, and it's in very favorable conditions, 5 to 10 knots of shear currently over the center. That's not bad at all. Now, model projections are showing that shear is going to go up with time over the next few days. Unfortunately, I don't see it going up enough before landfall. However, it does look like there is going to be a brief phase after landfall, or near landfall. I shouldn't be saying landfall because we don't know it's going to make landfall yet. But after its closest approach to Reunion, shear is expected to rise substantially and could get over 20 knots, which, while not horrible, is going to be unfavorable enough, especially with the dropping sea surface temperatures, I suspect, to cause some disorganization and perhaps some weakening with the system. Would you agree with that, Elliot?
I would definitely agree with that. And I do think that like especially as you sort of get into the higher latitudes, you're starting to see more of those westerlies, and I wouldn't be surprised to see like you said, some disorganization within the cyclone structure, um and with that disorganization, of course, some weakening, although it's still going to be something that we do have to watch as it approaches Mauritius and eventually Rodrigue.
Yeah, absolutely agreed there. And the final thing to look at is our water vapor imagery. And the water vapor imagery is also very unfortunate because it shows a very moist environment that this system is surrounded in. And I want to see if I can get precipitable water up here too. Yes, both show that this thing is in a environment with plenty of moisture, unfortunately, and it looks like that's going to remain the case throughout most of the forecast period. However, there is some suspicion on modeling that I'm seeing that this could have a bit of a drier environment in 4 to 5 days' time, which could be a piece of good news for Rodriguez, but the atmosphere doesn't appear that it's going to be running out of moisture anytime before then, so moisture shouldn't really be a mitigating factor for this storm.
Indeed, and I know that the GFS a few days ago, I was looking at the GFS for some of the videos I was making, and it did look like that there was going to be a tongue of dry air that did come by, although that would be after any potential impacts to Reunion that this thing would have. So I do think that this environment should be very favorable in terms of moisture all the way up until its closest passage to La Reunion.
Absolutely agree. And just to go over a summary here before we go to the Q&A, the current intensity of the system, according to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, is that it is a Category 1 system with winds of 70 knots, 80 miles per hour, and a minimum central pressure of 980 millibars. The storm is at 18.1 degrees south, 53.5 degrees east. Both Meteo France and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center projecting a very close approach to Reunion and perhaps some impacts to Mauritius as well. Well, definitely impacts, but direct impacts look a bit more shaky. We'll just have to see. Regardless, Category 3 equivalent storm currently forecast by the Joint Typhoon Warning Center at closest approach to Reunion. A intense tropical cyclone currently forecasted at closest approach to Reunion by Meteo France. Orange cyclone alerts are in place for Reunion by Meteo France, and Class 1 warnings are in place for Mauritius by the Mauritius Meteorological Meteorological Agency. The Mauritius Meteorological Service. So that's the summary. Significant rainfall, damaging winds, high surf, high waves that could cause storm surge. All major concerns with this system. So with that being said, we're going to turn it over to you guys in the audience. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that regarding the system, please feel free to ask. We're also happy to talk about weather across other portions of the world, but we want to keep you safe. Make sure you know how to be prepared for this system. Make sure that you know where the system's going, what the forecast is. We want to be as transparent with you and as informative to you as possible. So please ask your questions. We'll be happy to answer them. And with that being said, Elliot, is there anything I didn't touch on that you think would be a good idea to talk about?
I would say that generally you hit all the main points that I was going to hit. Definitely just prepare as soon as you can. Make sure to follow official forecasts and just stay safe. And again, if you guys do have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I know Thomas and I are here for all of us, here for you guys, and we would be more than happy to answer any question you guys would have, which is basically why we're here, to keep you guys informed. And yeah, I'll just turn it over to you guys now.
Absolutely. And while we wait for some questions to come in, last thing I'll say here before we do get back into the meteorology is please consider sharing the stream with people in the path of this thing. We know that this is a serious situation and we want to be there for people who are in the path of this. So if you can share this with them, get them this life-saving information, that helps us do our job better. So that way if they have questions, they can ask and we can get more life-saving information out to more people. So please help us in contributing to that mission if you can. Share it on social media, share it to your friends, share it to anyone who's in the path of this in particular. All right, we do have a question in the chat. Someone asking, may I ask, do you guys think there might be another Texas freeze this year?
I I would say yes. I actually made a short on this earlier today. The GFS is showing the next couple days being very cold in Texas. I think some of the overnight lows did drop down into the 20s for a good chunk of the state. and I did see freezing temperatures extend all the way as far south as the Gulf Coast. So yeah, this week is going to be a pretty cold one for you folks down in Texas.
Yeah, certainly. And beyond that, of course, it's more of an unknown. So, if you're asking beyond this, because this is already fairly well forecast, what the thinking is, at least currently from everything I'm seeing, there's not much confidence in anything way far out. Just from a quick glance at some long-range climate models, the tentative answer is no, and I think that that kind of aligns with um, a pattern flip that I think we're going to see in mid to late January too. So wouldn't be shocked to see things become a bit less active and hopefully somewhat warmer. However, there is absolutely no guarantee of that given how far out it is. So can't really give a confident answer on that one, unfortunately. But as of now, definitely this week, yes. Beyond that, an unknown. If anyone has any more questions, comments, concerns, anything of that nature, please feel free to ask and we'll be more than happy to answer them. In the meantime, we have another tropical entity that we're watching, and that is 98S. And if there is an embodiment of chaos in the tropics, I think this might take the cake. It's a convective burst out relatively far from inhabited land, which is good news. However, and Elliot, you can take a look at this too. The track spread across the Canadian and GFS ensembles and even the deterministic models is kind of crazy. Um, so,
Yeah, I was looking at this one earlier as well, and it does look like it's caught up in some pretty weak steering flow. So there is a pretty good chance that we could see an erratic track with this one. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see maybe another strong tropical storm out of this one as well. Um, Although, obviously, as you mentioned, Thomas, this one doesn't really look to be too much of a threat to land at this time. Although it does look like it should. I do think it's going to form.
yes, agreed there. Um, and another point during this break, if you do have additional questions, if you think that there's more that you'll want to talk about, more that you'll want to do, be sure to head to the description of this. We have a Discord server that you can join, and we'd be happy to let you in if you're over the age of 13, that is, and um, at or over the age of 13. In that case, we'd be happy to let you in and chat about the weather. So that could be the cyclone, that could be anything really. So feel free to join that if you want to be a part of our community. Beyond that, back to Belal. This is starting to look better and better on the infrared satellite imagery, and I'm really not liking the way that this is starting to look here. And something else that I'm not liking is the I've been keeping track of the objective estimates for this storm throughout the stream. When we started the stream, we had about an average of 70 to 75 knots. That average is now solidly around the 80 knot level. So um, our objective estimates are going up. All the evidence on satellite shows that this thing is rapidly intensifying, and unfortunately, all signs point towards this going as forecast, and unfortunately, especially for Reunion, that is bad news.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was looking at the earlier. I was looking at the satellite imagery, and the pattern that we're seeing right now is sort of the pattern that indicates that we definitely have a strong lower level eye wall, and we're starting to see those convective bursts sort of work their way upwards through the atmosphere and establish that eye wall further up into the atmosphere, which allows the storm to, in turn, have a stronger pressure fall in the center and for the winds to thus get stronger as well. So this is a pretty concerning pattern that I am seeing on infrared imagery as well, like you were saying.
Yes. So I I know we can't really make out too much from radar. However, these spiral bands that are moving in the general direction of Mauritius and Reunion do look impressive, and that does look like a well-defined kind of core feature that is starting to become better developed with time. So I'm not 100% sure what to think of that, but I think that that coupled with the satellite imagery is cause for concern, unfortunately.
Indeed. And while the core is likely right at the edge of the radar range at the moment, as we head later into the day in local time, we are likely going to see that core sort of come more and more into view on La Réunion radar. And I do think that if that is indeed the southeastern eye wall, that is a pretty strong eye wall signature for Category 1. And I do think that is some pretty significant cause for concern. So I would
Yeah.
definitely agree with you on that point.
I think it's also definitely manifested that shrimp shape at this point. I mean, it is one of the most classic shrimp looking systems I've seen in a while at this point, which is quite unfortunate. It is really starting to look like a shrimp there. And for those that are less meteorologically familiar, the reason that that's concerning to us is because that means that the system is beginning to wrap in. So that shows the indication that those winds are going inward. That shows a deepening of the low pressure system. And then the fact that we have storms, especially towards the center of the shrimp, booming up, that shows that we have a well-defined center. Those winds are converging. They're moving upward, and we're starting to see this consolidation and strengthening of the system. So not good news overall there. But I also want to talk about, because we kind of skipped over it a little bit just because we don't have a great way of forecasting it, but I still want to show some model visualizations. These are the wave heights to expect as we move through the next um, few days. So I'm going to go at St. Denis, right off the coast of St. Denis, at what the wave heights are. So currently 2.9 meters. That's fairly normal. But as this system strengthens and moves closer, those wave heights increase somewhat drastically. So in this specific case, it shows them going up to 5 meters. And then this particular Euro run shows Port Louis right off the coast of Mauritius getting 6.87 meter waves, which is like 5 meters higher than usual. So that's going to cause some substantial inland storm surge. If that verifies, our second solution. Elliot, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's important to recognize that wave height and storm surge aren't necessarily the same thing. Although I do agree with you that coastal flooding is likely going to be a pretty big issue with this storm, especially seeing as there's a decently sized fetch with this thing. Um,
Yeah,
Looking at the wind field, it's already going to start to be pushing some of that water toward the direction of the coastline. And I do think that you're likely going to see at least a meter or two of storm surge in some parts of the coastline.
I do agree. It should be noted that the distinction between wave heights and storm surge is that wave heights are your actual height of the wave. Your storm surge is um, how high up the water is above sea level inland. So they're not the same, but the higher the waves, the more substantial the storm surge is likely to be. So unfortunately, there's not a super easy or good way of talking about storm surge, especially in this part of the world. The National Hurricane Center, which is the leading agency in the world for tropical cyclone tracking, is just now getting a grip on how to forecast storm surge. So for us and for the rest of the world, it's very difficult to do. And even for them, it's difficult to do. So the best we can do is give you wave heights. And then by reading those wave heights, say, okay, well, if the waves are this high, that indicates, okay, the storm surge could be about yay big. So in this case, with the global forecast system, which has a much more aggressive wave height scheme, we're seeing waves over 8 meters possible, which would cause considerable coastal inundation, considerable storm surge that will reach fairly far inland, I would suspect, unfortunately. And then for Port Louis, give me just a moment here to properly get this down. We see those waves peaking at about 4 or 5 meters. So regardless, the whole point of this is that waves are going to be substantially higher than usual. And as a result of that, that's probably going to cause some storm surge, coastal flooding, and those impacts need to be taken seriously. Despite the fact, unfortunately, I don't think we have a great way of explaining it. Elliot, if you think there's a better way of explaining it, of talking about how storm surge is going to go, the floor is yours.
Right. So storm surge is basically the mechanism for which storm surge is generated is it's basically just water being pushed by the wind. And basically, the longer distance that water has to travel, the more it's able to sort of pile up, if you will, and storm surge is going to be enhanced from that point. And storm surge is generally bigger in storms with larger wind fields, and storms with higher winds also generate more storm surge. Now, Belal isn't necessarily the largest storm ever, but it still has some pretty substantial winds, and the wind field is likely to be decently sized by the time it does reach the island of La Reunion. So I do think that storm surge could be a pretty significant issue if you're right along the coastline in La Reunion. Mauritius, you're likely going to get less storm surge due to the fact that you're not really going to be in the core of the cyclone, at least from what we're seeing at this point in time. And I do think that storm surge could be an issue in like some of the low-lying coastal areas in Mauritius, although I don't anticipate it being as big a problem as it is on La Reunion at the moment.
That is fair enough. And we are to the final 2 minutes of how long the stream was originally supposed to go. However, I will leave it to the chat. If you guys want one more hour of chat, I'll stay here. I'm not sure if Elliot can, but I'll certainly be here for another hour if you guys want that. So just let me know in the chat here over the next couple of minutes if you have any additional questions, anything like that, and we'd be happy to stay. Of course, I'll go over the summary again and everything of what's going on with things at top of the hour. If you guys do want me to stay, and of course we can just jump straight into a Q&A as well. So with that, the major summary, in case this is when we're getting out of here, is that Belal is a significant threat to Reunion and Mauritius. The system is currently rapidly intensifying. It has winds of 80 miles per hour. It has a minimum central pressure of 980 millibars as of just about 4 hours ago. The storm is currently forecast to be very close to, if not make a direct landfall in Reunion in just about a day's time. Just under a day's time now, unfortunately, according to both the Joint Typhoon Warning Center and Meteo France. Joint Typhoon Warning Center is calling for a Category 3 system, and Meteo France is calling for a intense tropical cyclone. There are orange alerts currently in place. That's a level 2 out of 4 in Reunion. A level 1 out of 4 class 1 warning is in effect for Mauritius. Currently, no warnings in place for Rodrigues. Significant rainfall, well over a meter, is possible in the most mountainous regions of Reunion. We could see over half a meter of rainfall in Mauritius, and Rodrigues impacts are a bit more uncertain at this time. Damaging, destructive winds, heavy rainfall, and of course storm surge, all threats with this system as it does move towards Mauritius and Reunion. So we'll just have to see what happens there. And Elliot, are you up to stay for another hour here?
Yeah, I can stay as long as you need. I definitely agree with you on this, Thomas. rainfall is going to be a very large impact with this system. And I also think that the winds are going to be some pretty significant things as well for those of us in La Réunion. And preparations should be started as soon as possible, because today's probably going to be the last day where you're going to be able to actually safely get out and get the materials you need to prepare. So be sure to get out and get prepared today.
Absolutely the case. I do believe that, yeah, preparations need to happen now. Even if that means leaving the stream and going to do them, now is the time. Like right now, like these storms, they're moving in. You're already seeing some thunderstorms on Mauritius and Reunion. You may think, I'm going to wait until the rain clears up. The rain is not going to clear up, at least not for long periods of time anymore. We're starting to get to the point where this system is getting quite close. So now is the time to prepare. Frankly, I think most people should have prepared before this point. However, if it's not the case that you have prepared, now is the time. Someone saying, good morning. I'm also worried. My kids are visiting Mauritius right now for holiday. Okay, well, the good news for Mauritius is, at least right now, if everything goes according to plan, the storm, the worst of it should go south of Mauritius. Now, there is no guarantee of that. However, that is the expectation. More good news for Mauritius. The storm isn't expected to be quite as strong on its closest approach to Mauritius as it is at its closest approach to Reunion. Regardless of that, the biggest threat is going to be flooding. There's going to be pretty constant rainfall with the system with time. So it's really important that if your kids are there, that they prepare now. Let's get food, get water, get everything that they need, supplies, board up windows, board up doors, things like that, to protect themselves, as long as they prepare and they do those actions and they listen to local authorities. So that's going to be the Maurice Meteorological Services, I believe. As long as they follow that authority and everything that they're saying, then they'll be good to go. I'm actually going to send the link here in the chat real quick for you, so you can send this to your kids, so that way they have the latest information directly from the official source. So even after this stream ends, they can know as much as they can for that. But currently a class 1, that's a level 1 out of 4 warning in Mauritius. However, that will likely be upgraded with time, and again, you'll be able to see that straight from this website. So this will give them the latest information, the things they need to know. But the biggest things I can say is just get essential supplies. That's food, that's water, it's a first aid kit, things like that. Board up windows, board up doors, and make sure to have a plan. Make sure they have a plan for flooding, which is going to be highest level of a building, and winds, which is going to be lowest level of a building. And if you're dealing with both, then I would say get in the middle. Try to find the middle ground between the two, and that should be okay. So regardless, I don't think that this is going to be some catastrophic destruction of the island kind of event. However, this will be substantial. This will be substantial enough to do some damage. In particular, I think the Joint Typhoon Warning Center is predicting a Category 2 equivalent by that point. It's borderline Category 3 or 2 equivalent. So if this does directly hit Mauritius, in a worst case scenario, it's going to be, from a wind perspective, significant roof damage, perhaps roof removal, and some collapsing of exterior walls, but the interior most rooms should be fine in well-constructed homes and buildings. So not expecting that this is going to be anything that can't be handled, as long as you're prepared. So just as long as your kids know how to prepare for this thing, they will be okay. And Elliot, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, and from what we're seeing, Mauritius is likely going to be on the northern edge of the wind fields. And given that this is in the southern hemisphere, we generally tend to see that the northern edge of the storms generally have the weaker winds rather than the southern side of the storms. So another piece of good news for Mauritius is that winds aren't likely going to be as strong as they would be at the core of the storm or even on the southern side of the storm. So I would say that Mauritius is still at risk for some potentially storm force or even hurricane force wind gusts or even sustained winds, although you're likely not going to see the level of damage you're going to see in La Reunion from winds.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. Someone else saying almost landfall in St. Denis. If you take a look at the exact track, the line of the track from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center and Mateo, France, then yes, you're absolutely right. However, the cone, I want to drive home the cone that you see here is where the center could possibly go. So it could be anywhere from directly hitting Reunion to going south to hitting Mauritius. There's a lot of uncertainty there. The current consensus is that it's going to make a pretty close approach to Reunion, and then the core is going to go south of Mauritius. We'll see if that happens. It's not guaranteed. However, an exact landfall location, and even if this thing's going to make landfall, that's something that we can't answer yet. So don't pay exact attention to where that line is. Pay attention to who's in the cone, where the center could pass over. If anyone else has any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to ask, and please send this video, this stream, to people who you know are in the path of this that could be impacted, so we can get as much life-saving information out to people as possible. Latest satellite imagery is continuing to show signs that this system is rapidly intensifying. Now, just to note, this thing was rated a Category 1 with winds of 80 miles per hour just over 4 hours ago. Right now, if we take a blend of objective estimates that are done by computers, so this is not real people that do these, this is computers, I want to make that clear. We see that the average has jumped from 80 to 85, perhaps even 90 miles per hour. Now that still lands it in the Category 1 ballpark. However, that does indicate that the storm is strengthening, and unfortunately, Elliot, I'm starting to see could be a little bit of a depression of temperatures near the center of this circulation, and we have minus 70s now surrounding that, and minus 80s are nearly forming a, even if disorganized, complete kind of ring around that center. So I think that the quickest phase of intensification is about to begin because the structure is nearly there.
Indeed. And like once you sort of see that structure become more symmetrical as it is now, we're sort of seeing that very large band wrap around the southern side of the storm. I would say that yes, I agree with you. The quickest phase of intensification is probably going to be beginning very shortly, if not already beginning now. And I do think that that depression is likely sort of not going to be a long-lived feature, although I do agree that that is the general area where we're likely going to be seeing potentially an eye form in the coming hours.
Yeah,
And I do think that with this system, the eye clearing is going to be fairly gradual, although even without a fully cleared eye, the winds with this system, with convection that strong and that violently rotating around the center, the winds are going to be packing quite the punch once they reach La Réunion.
yeah, for sure. And again, intense tropical cyclone forecast by Mateo, France, Category 3 equivalent forecast by the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. And you know, the unfortunate thing about this situation is, even despite modeling just with the ocean heat content this thing has access to, and the pretty good conditions. I mean, let's look at ocean heat content real quick. How much of this are we expecting here? Need to get this to go away for us. There we go. What is our ocean heat content? Trying to find it. Where is it on here? Oh, it's not available for this part of the world here. That's unfortunate. But you would expect considerable ocean heat content, wouldn't you? Especially given the lack of tropical activity as of late in this part of the basin.
Oh yeah. Um, I would say that in terms of ocean heat content, we're likely going to be um, seeing a pretty significant drop off once we get a little bit further south of 20 degrees south. A good rule of thumb for the tropics outside of the Western Pacific and North Atlantic is that ocean heat content generally isn't that favorable once you get poleward of about 20 degrees latitude. So I do think that upwelling could be a factor with this system once it clears the island of La Réunion. And I do think that um, weakening is likely.
Absolutely the case, and yeah, I think the most unfortunate thing about this is just that Reunion is right there when the conditions are going to start to fall off. So it's going to be there at peak. This storm is likely going to peak right as it hits Reunion, which is quite unfortunate to say the very least, because you have two things going on. Firstly, you get the worst of the impacts in terms of wind, in terms of wave heights, but also you get the worst of the rainfall because once a storm begins to weaken, you have more downward motion than upward motion, and so rain is going to be falling at a heavier rate than it already would have otherwise. So, very unfortunate situation for Reunion. Again, for those of you in um, let's see, for Amanda, who is concerned about Mauritius, rainfall is going to be substantial, but I'm not expecting the wind to pack quite as much of a punch. If anyone here has questions, comments, concerns, anything of that nature with either this cyclone or other weather going on across the world, please feel free to ask and we'll be more than glad to answer it. We're going to be on until the end of this hour, at least I will be. We'll see if Elliot will be staying with me. And in that vein, um, it's always great to talk to people. It's always great to have this community. And speaking of that community, um, you can introduce more people to it if you know anyone that's in the path of this system or any other weather that you think would be useful to talk about. Please send them a link to the stream and we'd be happy to help them out. And also, if they want to join our Discord community where we chat about the weather, that can also happen. And with that being said, it does appear, Elliot, thank you so much for joining the stream tonight. It does appear that you'll be going in just a couple minutes, which is completely understandable, given how late it is here in the United States. But before you go, just some final thoughts for everyone on how you're feeling about the system.
I am feeling not very good for the island of La Réunion, but if you prepare, I do think that you are going to have a very good chance of keeping yourself and your loved ones safe. And I do want to emphasize that preparing should be done as soon as possible, especially since you see those outer bands starting to move in, starting to see some thunderstorms pop up on the island. Um, and these thunderstorms are only really going to get worse throughout the day. So now is the time, if you are on La Réunion, to be preparing. Click off the stream and make sure you have all of that food and water you need, especially if like the roads get washed out, because I know you guys are going to get quite a bit of rainfall from the system. So make sure you have several days worth of food and water ready, and make sure to board up your windows as well.
Absolutely the case there. Um, Yeah, so Elliot, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It has been greatly appreciated, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your evening. And thank you so much for the contributions you've made over the past few days and the attendance at the stream this evening.
No problem. And I just want to wish everybody in the chat, if you are on La Réunion or not, please stay safe and stay weather aware, folks.
Absolutely, that is for sure the case. So now you're stuck with me for the remainder of this hour, for the next 45 minutes or so, and I'll be glad to answer any of your questions regarding the system. So we can start bringing those in whenever, but the thing I want to talk about right now is the preparations. So preparations are something that a lot of weather channels tell you to do, but they don't tell you what to do. So today I'm gonna give you an idea of what that looks like. So the first thing is you want to make sure that you know, um, here, give me just a second, that you know what's going on with the system. So that means stay tuned to your official sources of information. We're also going to be posting frequent updates. So the official sources, that's where you get the most up-to-date information, but that can also be very technical. So we're here to break that information down. Beyond that, and that's going to be Meteo France and the Mauritius Meteorological Service. Those are your two sources of information for Reunion. That is Meteo France. For Mauritius and Rodrigues, that is the um, Mauritius Meteorological Service. So please make sure that you have a somewhat thorough understanding of those places and how to navigate those sites and everything. That's always very, very important. So that's the first step. Next step is you want to make sure that you know what the impacts of these storms are going to be. So when it comes to a tropical cyclone, especially this one, you want to make sure that you know that heavy rain is a threat with this, and that's for both Mauritius and Reunion. Strong, damaging, perhaps even destructive winds are a possibility with this thing. Rip currents are going to be possible, so that can sweep you away. High surf, storm surge, things like that. And less common here, but non-zero chance of a tornado or two. Make sure you know if you live in a flood-prone area. Now, everyone on Reunion, unfortunately, I'm expecting is going to be getting near a meter of rain. That's a lot of rain. Make sure that you also know your home's structural risks. Is it more vulnerable to flooding? Is it more vulnerable to wind? Mobile homes and basements are very vulnerable, especially when it comes to flooding. However, when it comes to wind, basements are actually one of the better places to be. However, for flooding, you don't want to be in a mobile home or a basement. Beyond that, when it comes to forecast information, make sure that you know where to get your forecast from. So we just talked about that. Mauritius Meteorological Service and Meteo France. Make sure you know your alerts. So the alert system, it's a level 1 through 4 system. From Meteo France, it's yellow, orange, red, and purple. Those are your 4 levels, which progressively get worse and worse. Level 1 being something to watch, level 3, level 4 being this is serious, this is imminent, it's about to happen. Currently a level 2 for Reunion. So now is the time to prepare. When it comes to Mauritius and Rodrigues, that is a class 1 through 4 system, very similar in terms of how the 4-tier system works. Currently a class 1 warning in Mauritius, no warning currently in Rodrigues. We'll see if that changes with time. So make sure you know what those warnings mean. Make sure you know how to get those warnings. Again, that's that official source. And make sure that you know that your potential impacts, regardless of the storm's technical category number or label. The other thing to note, when you look at those cones that these forecasts put out, that's where the center could go. These dangerous, deadly hazards happen outside of that cone. So make sure that you're aware of that. When you look at those wind fields, see how far that extends at the beginning of the forecast outside of the cone. The thing below me, that cone right there, you'll notice those wind fields are a bit larger than the cone itself. So make sure that you know exactly what that looks like, and that's why, even though Mauritius is right on the cusp of that cone, we're still expecting significant impacts. Beyond that, this is the phase that we're currently in. This is when a storm threatens, knowing what to do. So be sure to protect your home. Let's cover windows, secure doors, and secure loose items, lawn furniture, things like that. Bring that inside. Determine your sheltering options and consider your pets. So that's going to be basements, storm cellars, things like that. If you're looking from a wind perspective, it's going to be higher up from a flooding perspective. You want to get as close to the center of the island if you can. If you have a place to do that, the means to do that. Make sure that you have medication, supplies, phone chargers, and your vehicle is ready to go in case you do want to get to a safer location. Make sure that you're helping your neighbors, especially the vulnerable and the elderly. Make sure that people around you also know what's going on. That can be either by sending them the stream, sending them official information from Meteo France and the Mauritius Meteorological Service, or just telling them verbally or via text what you know is going on with the system. And then finally, make sure that you're listening to local officials on the best actions to protect yourself from this storm with time. I am a meteorology major, not a civil engineer. So while I know a lot about what this storm is doing and how it's going to behave and what those impacts could look like when it comes to preparation, damage specifics, things like that, I can give you sweeping overall guidance. I know that, but I don't know things specific to you. That's what your local governments are for. So I implore you to look at your local authorities to figure out how it's best for you to prepare. During the storm, once the core of this begins to arrive, we're already seeing outer bands and thunderstorms develop with this. Once the core starts to arrive, which will happen within the next 18 hours or so. So overnight, heading into tomorrow morning, for those of you local time, this is when we're going to have to start acting in this way. You want to stay in your safe places from water and wind. So again, that's going to be interior room, kind of at a middle level of a building if you're accounting for both. Keep in mind that impacts can be felt far from the coast, so the entirety of the island is going to be feeling impacts here. Both islands are going to be feeling impacts of some sort, especially when it comes to the rainfall side. The entirety of Reunion will be getting significant winds and significant rainfall. Mauritius, I can guarantee significant rainfall. The wind is less certain at the moment. And then finally, again, I have to implore you during this time, listen to local officials. We might be live streaming as well. There's a lot that's going to be going on, so make sure that you know what's going on, and you can account for that accordingly. Excuse me. Finally, after the system moves through, make sure that you remain vigilant. You'll want to have shoes, something hard soled, so that way if there's debris, you're not stepping in that. That's not causing you major problems. As hazards remain, it's going to be heat down power lines, floodwaters, and more. Could all be problems. You'll want to clean up safely. Don't push yourself too hard and check in on your neighbors if you push yourself too hard. If you collapse, again, medical resources are already going to be thin. So make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Only use generators outdoors and over 20 feet from your home. This is to avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. And prepare for the likelihood that help and communications may not be available. Preemptively ask for that. Preemptively communicate with loved ones, family, things like that. You want to do all that now, not later, as communications could be down later on. So finally, the major thing, the things that you can do right now, prepare. That's board up your loose items, things like that. Make sure you have food and water. Make sure that you're protecting yourself. Make sure that you're aware, you know your local officials. So that's what I would encourage all of you in the path of this thing to do, especially in Reunion and Mauritius. As for Rodrigues, this thing isn't quite here yet, but still, I'd say the actions of getting your medical kit in place, things like that, that's what's important. So make sure that all of that's in place. With that, if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, anything of that nature, please feel free to ask, and I'll be more than glad to answer them. Let's check in on our radar. See just what's going on storm-wise. So we do have thunderstorms that are going up, and I think these mountains are really encouraging them, but looks like we do have a thunderstorm in central Reunion that's kind of weakened down, so not much in terms of rainfall and thunderstorms there. However, we are seeing significant heavy rainfall in Mauritius at the moment. This is not associated with particularly strong winds. This is not associated with high waves or anything yet. This is towards the outside of the cyclone. So this is our first outer band really from the system. That's moving away here fairly soon. We're going to have this gap. This gap is already fairly clear of where we'll see a bit of a lull in terms of rainfall. Now that might not last terribly long. We'll just have to see. But there will be a bit of a lull in terms of rainfall for a couple hours there. This is a much more robust outer band, and from this point, it's not really going to stop. We're going to be seeing heavy rainfall, heavy precipitation moving in throughout the rest of the forecast period. So in 2 to 3 hours, we're going to start to see pretty constant rain. That's why you need to prepare now before this moves in. There'll be some crackles of thunder associated with this as well. And then this right here, this is near the core. this is kind of the core of the system. And just to cross-reference that with satellite, yeah, that's the core. That's where the eye of this system is developing, is right here. So the core is well within sight. And just to track that out for you, from St. Denis, um, the core of this system is about 315 kilometers. From Port Louis on Mauritius, this storm is about 436 kilometers away, the center of circulation. From the outer bands, Port Louis is 175 kilometers from the next major outer band, and Reunion is about 53. So this is not far away. This will become more substantiated with time. So someone has a question here. What are your thoughts on the other disturbances active right now? I only know of one. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm pretty sure we only have one other, and that is Invest 98S. Now, 98S is it's this area of interest that's moving. It's meandering in the southeastern Indian Ocean away from any inhabited land, really. And from everything that I'm seeing, all indications point to there being high uncertainty with this and how strong it gets. We have some model ensembles that deepen this a lot. We have some that don't so much. Regardless of that, this thing's going to be fairly far away from land, so I'm not terribly concerned about it, but I do think it will form if I had to guess in that regard. But we'll know a lot more about this after the next few days. You'll notice just the absolute disaster that is the next 2 to 4 days with the system. But in about 4 days' time, especially, that's where we start to see that this will have more definitive steering, and that's when we'll know much better what the system is going to do. Someone else saying, weather still calm in Mauritius, only a few intermittent showers, not much winds, only some outer bands passing over Mauritius. Yeah, so what I just noticed on radar for you was that there's, especially in central Mauritius, is that there's a new storm that's kind of gone up with the mountains, so I'm expecting that a lot of Mauritius is in some heavier thunderstorms at the moment. But you'll have to let me know what conditions are like on the ground there. But as of now, it does look like there are showers going up. If you're in Port Louis, it's not quite as bad for the moment, but especially over most of the remainder of the island, things are a bit worse. So in terms of rainfall, but yeah, wind shouldn't be very strong yet. There shouldn't be much of a flooding concern or wave concern just yet. However, again, the core of the cyclone is getting closer and closer with time, so we'll see what happens at that point. And unfortunately, the signs of rapid intensification with this thing continue. This looks exceptional. So we'll see if that continues to evolve the way it has been, but unfortunately, it is looking very, very good right now. Let's check the objective estimates. Yeah, everything that I'm seeing shows that this is strengthening and is likely in the 85-90 mile per hour ballpark at this point, which I think official estimates may be there. Let's see. Someone's saying there are also tropical lows in the Australian region that could develop but are not tagged on ATCF. I wonder, does Bureau of Meteorology have those tropical lows? Yes, they do. They have 3U and 4U. So tropical low 3U, that's near Darwin, Australia. That's in the Northern Territory. It's going to be moving out to sea. Has a less than 5% chance of being a tropical cyclone strength by the time we get to Sunday at 11 p.m. And then we have 04U, which also has a less than 5% very low chance of tropical cyclone strength by Sunday. So let's see what the deal is over there real quick, if people don't mind. If people want me to head back to Mauritius, we'll do that pretty quickly, and Reunion, because that's, of course, the main focus of this. But yeah, if we move over here just for a minute, here's that first system. That looks fairly healthy. That's a considerable thunderstorm activity, and the lightning bolts make it crystal clear that this is rapidly rising air. And our other system, and it does have a bit of a spin to it. Is this our other area? Yeah, so this is also 98S. So this one is designated. This one not so much. Let's see, what's the anticipation? We also have another tropical low, 5U, that develops on Monday night, and 4U's chances of development increase with time. So let's go over this a little bit. What's going on over here? We'll kind of zoom out to view the region as a whole. And let's see, so tomorrow looks like chances are very low for formations from 3U and 4U. However, Monday morning, time we get to Monday afternoon, 4U now has a low chance, 10% chance of formation. We have 3U at a less than 5% and 5U at a less than 5% chance of formation. So on Monday night, these two systems don't look too keen on forming. I assume it's this system moving in this general direction that becomes 5U. But both of those tropical lows don't look too interesting. So this one that we already anticipate will form is expected to form eventually. And the Bureau of Meteorology increases probabilities tomorrow. But as we go into Tuesday, that low chance becomes moderate. That's 25%. Very low chances remain for 3U and 5U. So let's see, when do chances increase for those? If they do. Yeah, 4U has a high chance of formation overall at 55%. 60%. Now 5U, Thursday morning, that's when the Bureau of Meteorology upgrades things from a less than 5% chance to a 10% chance of formation. So let's see what's going on by Thursday. Okay, so we have this system here, and we have this system over here. So this system is the one with the 10% chance. I know these are beautiful graphics. And this system is the one with the 5% chance by that point. Fascinating. Okay, yes, 4U is 98S, by the way. That is correct. So 4U is likely to develop. 3U, still 5%, still 10% chance for 5U. Let's see, do we have any further upgrades in probabilities here? Don't see anything. By the end of the forecast period, 10% chance of 5U forming, less than 5% chance of 3U forming, and a 65% chance of 4U or 98S forming at that point. So that's our Australian Bureau of Meteorology designated areas of interest. So let's head back to Belal. So there we go, and Abdullah, I hope I pronounced that right. I probably didn't. Saying to Amanda, no need to worry about Mauritius being because it's well equipped and already prepared for the cyclone. No cyclonic weather today. Yeah, the weather's going to be moving in tomorrow, and again, class 1 warning in place. Not a huge deal. In a worst case scenario, this thing is going to be somewhat strong. Mauritius is well prepared for it. They do know what they're doing. However, still, I would recommend that not mean to dismiss the threat, nor to say that you shouldn't be getting things like supplies, food, water, stuff like that, in case things do get more serious with time. Especially just given how good a conditions the system's in. So I don't want to cause panic. I don't want to cause fear. Don't want to cause any of that because that's just not necessary. And this is not going to be some catastrophic situation. However, it is going to bring significant impacts, and that does need to be acknowledged. And preparations for that is always a good idea in my book. Moving on from that, I don't know if the models still have it, but the South Pacific could spew out something soon, but that's more unlikely. We'll see, perhaps. I'm just going to take a look off screen real quick, see if this is something to look at on the stream, because if nothing forms, there's not much to show. However, if there is stuff to show, I will certainly show it. So let's see. Could the South Pacific spit something out? Nothing that isn't associated with 5U. No. So that would be 5U that might spit something out. That's that 10% chance of formation area that bomb issued. If there's something else, then let me know, but I don't see anything, at least on the ensemble projections from the European model or the GFS, the Global Forecast System. So just let me know if that's correct or not. Beyond that, again, if you know anyone in Mauritius and Reunion who isn't informed about this, who doesn't know about this, who has questions, comments, concerns they may want to ask, please send them here. I'll be happy to answer them. And I'll be happy to refer them to the best sources of information to keep up with this in the future. The mission of Advective Weather is to educate people without the hype, without the fear mongering, to give people weather information as sincerely as possible without any of the hyperbole, without trying to get clicks and views. It's all about just getting the facts to people. So yeah. Someone's saying I am really hoping that people don't make Candace jokes about the next Southwest Indian Ocean system if it's named that. Yeah, me neither. If you know, you know. If you don't know, then it's best you don't know. But uh, those jokes would be very annoying, to say the very least. But that is the farthest that we will go on this stream. It's unfortunate we don't have like aircraft, airplanes, things like that that look at these systems out here. However, again, we still do have our satellite estimates, and let's see if those changed. Yes. Yeah, we're in the 75 knot ballpark pretty solidly now, unfortunately. So my expectation is that we're going to see this system continue its rapid intensification trend all the way up until landfall, or close to landfall. Someone saying there's lots of rain in Mauritius now. That's to be expected, because we do have a thunderstorm there. Now, this isn't going to last for long. That's the good news. This particular thunderstorm, if we look at the radar on Mauritius, the rain it's somewhat confined to the island, and it's mostly due to the mountainous regions that you're seeing it. So there will be a bit of a stream of rain here over the next little while, next half hour, perhaps even hour. But after that, again, the expectation is that we're going to see a bit of a break in all of that. So hopefully that's what will happen, because there's going to be lots of rain. I think over 600 millimeters of rain is possible, especially for Reunion, perhaps even up to a meter, and over 4/10 of a meter, if not half a meter, in Mauritius, especially at this rate. So we'll see. Someone saying many Mauritians have gone shopping for stuff yesterday. Hopefully the system has a small diameter and will not be that threatening, even though the storm is expected to strengthen in the coming hours. So yeah, for Mauritius in particular, if things go as forecast, tropical storm force, gales, those are likely. However, the full-blown cyclone force winds, if this goes exactly down the center of the track, not as likely. Now, there is a possibility that this does take a more northward track. And that's what this cone shows. So there's still a possibility that Mauritius gets a direct hit from the center of this. Now, that's very much on the outer fringes of possibilities at this point. I think it's much more likely that this is going to be very close to, if not directly hit Reunion. However, you are within the cone. I say it's important to respect that. So I'd be preparing as if it's a direct hit, but like you said, I'd be hoping this will be nothing more than a minor inconvenience for you guys. I'm hoping that this will not be anything more than a minor inconvenience for anyone, although unfortunately, someone's going to get hit here pretty hard in the next day or two. So that's just the unfortunate reality of the situation, but hopefully things won't be as bad as they're currently projected to be, especially for Reunion. But yeah, in Mauritius, it's just that solid hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Right now, it's looking more towards the best case scenario, but we don't know that. So things could go south real quick. So just make sure that you're keeping a close eye on that. And again, heavy rainfall is already beginning, which isn't ideal, especially because the core of the system is going to bring very heavy rainfall. And we are seeing those radar returns get stronger and stronger with time with a very robust eye wall forming. So that's unfortunate. But That is the way it is sometimes. So see how that goes, but yeah. That's all I got there. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, anything of that nature, please feel free to ask. I'll be more than glad to answer them. Cyclone warning class 2 is expected late afternoon here in Mauritius. The possibility of Mauritius having a direct hitter is around 5 to 10%. Reunion Island has a 60% chance. Sounds about right for a direct hit. However, I'd say 80, 90. I'd give it a 90% shot that this thing's going to make a pretty close approach. 80% shot that this will make a pretty close approach to Reunion, either north or south. I'd say that it's a better chance than not that this will be closer to Reunion than it will be to Mauritius when it's all said and done. So, the best news for everyone here is a southern track. Since the southernmost track, because Reunion still gets the worst of the impacts of anyone, but they then get the tropical storm force and maybe brief cyclone force winds. Mauritius is pretty much out of the tropical storm force winds, and then Rodrigues has nothing to worry about, really, in that scenario. The worst case scenario is when it kind of goes north, splits the islands, and then heads towards Rodrigues, because then all three islands are going to get significant impacts. So we'll see which one of the two scenarios happens. Right now, somewhere in the middle is favored. However, things have been trending south. So the hope is that this will just trend farther and farther south with time until eventually we're not really seeing a direct landfall or close to a direct hit on the cards. But unfortunately, right now, I'd expect that a direct hit is pretty plausible, if not likely, in Reunion. Apparently, Belal means full moon as a name. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Um, Someone else saying, do you think there may be a change in direction of Belal actually um, coming to Mauritius? It's not entirely certain. It's definitely going to shift east. That we know. So, unfortunately, it's not going to turn the other way. It will turn in the general direction of Mauritius. It's just a question of when that direction change is going to happen. If it happens early, then unfortunately Mauritius is on for a direct hit. If it happens about when expected, then Reunion is on for a direct hit. If it happens later than expected, that's the best case scenario where no one really gets a direct hit from the storm. So the hope is that this is going to go south. That would be the best case scenario. However, as of now, it's looking like Reunion in particular is going to get pretty nasty impacts, and Mauritius is still going to get tropical storm and perhaps even cyclone force winds at some point during this system. So, hope that was a good way of answering your question. We have about 15 minutes to go here on this stream before I'm going to be calling it a night. Here in the United States, it's nearly 11 p.m. my time in the United States. I know for you guys, it's much earlier in the day there in Mauritius. Rodrigues, Reunion, particularly, I'm just getting it to be exact. Yeah, it's 8:44 a.m. for you, so you're starting your Sunday or your Saturday. No, you are starting your Sunday. Yeah, you're starting your Sunday, and uh, most of Sunday shouldn't be too bad. It's gonna be Monday when the worst of it moves in. So, unfortunately, I think right around this time tomorrow for you guys, especially in Reunion, is going to be when the worst of this hits. And then for Mauritius, I'd say about the following day, maybe a bit before then, is when the worst of it hits for you. Is there a possibility that it takes a U-turn in Mauritius? Um, shouldn't take a U-turn per se. Could turn early though, but I don't think it's going to turn back around. There is one model run that shows that. I don't believe it for a second. It has the steering currents all wrong, so there's not going to be any sort of U-turn or anything like that, or a turn away, unfortunately. But it should be a one and done kind of deal, where this moves through and that's it. Someone asking what's the category of the cyclone? According to Matteo France, it's in the tropical cyclone category, but not quite an intense tropical cyclone. On the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale, which is what I tend to use, it's a category 1 with winds of 80 miles per hour. However, I suspect it's a bit stronger than that. Still a category 1, but 85, perhaps even 90 miles per hour. So, category 1 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and a tropical cyclone on Matteo France's scale. So, that's what I got there. I hope that was helpful. Minimum central pressure currently at 980 millibars. I will go over here Matteo France's key messages real quick for this. I think that'd be good to do. So let's talk about it. Cyclone Belal and what to expect. Here's what they say. Belal continues its phase of sustained to rapid intensification. System reached tropical cyclone status this morning at 4 a.m. local time, a little more than 300 kilometers to the northwest of Reunion. They then say intensification to an intense tropical cyclone is expected in the next 24 hours, with the system gradually approaching the Great Mascarenes Islands from the west-northwest. Belal is therefore expected to be a very dangerous cyclone accompanied by extreme winds close to the heart of the storm when it approaches the sister islands, and in particular Reunion Island, from Sunday night to Monday and during the day on Monday. Uncertainty in the exact trajectory is still on the order of 100 to 120 kilometers, but the probability of a passage in the immediate vicinity of Reunion is significant. For Reunion Island, the intense core of the cyclone is likely to pass less than 100 kilometers from the island during the day on Monday. According to the current preferred scenario, the island is potentially exposed to major cyclone impact with the possibility of devastating winds. Whatever happens, even with the passage 50 to 100 kilometers from the island, significant impacts related to strong winds, heavy rains, and cyclonic swells are expected. For Mauritius, they're expected to experience very deteriorated conditions from Monday or even the following night in terms of wind, rain, and swell, even if the probability of a direct influence from the heart of the storm seems lower than for Reunion. The inhabitants of Reunion Island and Mauritius are implored to closely monitor the evolution of the forecast concerning the serious cyclone threat and to comply with the instructions of the local authorities. Should be noted, I did change a couple of words in there, not exactly because it means much different, but because I'm not able to read French, so I translated it to English, and some of the translation grammar was a bit off, so it's not word for word what you get on a translation of the site, but it's pretty close. So hope that was helpful. And again, for alerts, Mauritius in a Class 1 warning at the moment. However, it is expected to go up to a Class 2. Let's just double check that. Yeah. Class 1 cyclone warning remains. And then, yeah, we're expecting... We still have that orange cyclone alert in Reunion. Let's see, we have some updates in the chat. Some saying, I'm nowhere near where Belal is right now, but it's still nice to watch live updates like this. Well, I appreciate your watching. I appreciate that you enjoy what we do. And if you know anyone in the path of this thing, sending this to them so that way they can get life-saving information, that's the main goal. But of course, if you're wanting to watch this because you enjoy it, you're a weather enthusiast, that's of course wonderful too. We do have a link in the description to our Discord server where you can chat with myself and other weather enthusiasts, both on the Advective Weather team and just weather enthusiasts in general who've joined the server over the past year or so as we've built the community. Someone else saying, right now it's category 1, that is in fact true. Someone saying that they're waiting for the cyclone in Mauritius and there's heavy rain and thunderstorms currently ongoing, and that makes some sense. we're seeing those mountains really lift things up. So heavy thunderstorms at the moment, but those are not associated with the core of this system. So again, excuse me, I am expecting a break here relatively soon in that regard. Someone else saying by tomorrow morning it's highly likely to be a Category 2 or even 3 due to rapid intensification. Wouldn't be shocked about that. Again, we're seeing this system in very favorable conditions. So the three major things that you look for when you have a tropical cyclone are that you have warm sea surface temperatures above 26 degrees Celsius. We have that. You have low wind shear below 20 knots. We have that. And you have relative humidities of above 60% or so. And we have that. So this has all three of the major things you look for a rapidly intensifying tropical cyclone. So I agree with the assessment that this will likely be a Category 2 or even 3 by tomorrow morning. I expect a 3 by tomorrow morning, your time, local time. Easily a Category 3, and I think that that could even be conservative. I think that, of course, these meteorological centers, it's better to be conservative than to be over aggressive, but I wouldn't be shocked to see this reach low end, but still Category 4 status. Abdel saying, great updates. Admire the analysis of the forecaster. I appreciate that. I am a college student at the University of Missouri at the moment, so I'm not particularly I don't know everything there is to know, um, but I'm doing my best here. I've been tracking tropical cyclones for a few years now, and so what I do is I relay the official information because that is something I do know how to do, and I do know how to break down what it is they're saying, um, things like that. So I'm glad that you like the updates, you like the analysis, and I'm glad you think I'm doing a good job. It means a lot. It's always good to know you're doing something right. Brando Tech Info says, appreciate the info. And saying, thanks. Yes, they went shopping to get emergency stuff. The update 6 hourly, the people's there of the situation. Yeah, so Amanda, as long as they're keeping track of updates and they have their supplies, they're going to be okay. That's pretty much all they can do, and that's pretty much all they'll need to do. The impacts are likely not going to be out of this world there. Mauritius, as someone from Mauritius said earlier, well prepared for cyclones. This isn't their first rodeo, and of course they're okay now. So this is not going to be a situation where all hell breaks loose or anything like that, because people know what they're doing. Reunion does too, but still, preparing is the best idea. I'm glad that your kids have prepared to get emergency stuff. That's the right thing to do. Someone saying thank you for all the information. Of course, I'm happy to do it. It's always great to do this stuff. It's really been a nice stream tonight, being able to relay information and do what I love while also getting that life-saving information to the people who need it. Someone's saying, yes, you're absolutely right, 80% direct hit for Reunion. I'm not sure I'd say 80% chance of a direct hit exactly. I want to make it clear, like the strongest wins, yes, but technically the center could move around it. That doesn't matter so much, but for all intents and purposes, yeah, there's a pretty good chance of a direct hit, the worst of the impacts hitting Reunion. Someone else saying Mauritius Meteorological Center is forecasting the cyclone intensity to peak up during the day until tomorrow morning. That's about the consensus right now. The conditions will start to drop off after tomorrow morning. So once it passes Reunion, basically, it's going to start to drop off. Now, for those in Mauritius, that doesn't mean to let your guard down. It's still likely to be at least a Category 2. So the anticipation is a Category 3 as it moves into Reunion, a intense tropical cyclone, and then downgraded to a tropical cyclone on Mateo Francis scale, a Category 2 when it makes its closest approach to Mauritius. Beyond that, uncertainty grows, especially for Rodrigues. So if you know anyone in Rodrigues, unfortunately, there's not much useful information I can give them other than to keep their guard up over the next few days and keep an eye on forecasts. Yeah, so it's 10:55 p.m. my time, which means it's 8:55 a.m. your time, but it's starting to get late here, so this is the final 5 minutes of the stream for me. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, please feel free to ask those now, and I'll be more than glad to answer those before the stream ends off. While we do that, I'm just going to give one last summary as questions come in of things, and then I'll answer anything that's there before ending off the stream, even if we do go over a little bit. So general summary. This is tropical system of biggest concern, Belal. It is currently rapidly strengthening in the southwest Indian Ocean, about 300 kilometers away from Reunion, a bit farther away from Mauritius. The storm was 80 miles per hour when we started the stream. However, I do suspect it's at 85 or 90 now. However, there has not been an official update in that regard. Reunion has a level 2 out of 4 orange cyclone warning currently in place. Would not be surprised to see that upgraded to red and perhaps even purple with time. So make sure that you're preparing right now and finishing those preparations. I'd say by noon, honestly, about 3 hours from now, I'd say is when those preparations like have to be finished for both areas here, really, because the outer bands, the really bad storms are going to hit at about the same time. The center is just not going to be as close to Mauritius as Reunion in the end, we don't think. So we have a level 2 out of 4 orange warning for Reunion. We have a level 1 out of 4 class 1 warning for Mauritius. No alerts currently in place for Rodrigues. However, that could change with time. The system currently has favorable conditions to strengthen rather rapidly, so it will likely make its closest approach to Reunion around this time tomorrow. Conditions are already beginning to deteriorate, and when it makes that closest approach, it will likely be a Category 3 equivalent system, or and a intense tropical cyclone, according to Meteo France. It's unlikely to be a Category 2 equivalent system and a tropical cyclone, according to Meteo France, by the time it makes its closest approach to Mauritius, before maintaining Category 2 or cyclone intensity throughout the remainder of the forecast period as it heads in the general direction of Rodrigues. So with all that, final thing, latest information is that Cyclone Belal is slowing down with signs of intensification. That is indeed accurate. The storm is expected to continue to slow down for a little bit until it makes that turn. Once it makes that turn, it'll start to speed up again. But until that point, it will slow down. So it's going to kind of slingshot almost. Kind of like so. And the center could be really anywhere within this very poorly drawn cone. I need to do a better job with that. The center cone is there. Okay. It's a lot more reasonable. Anywhere within that general vicinity, the center could pass. Someone saying, keep it up, man. Thanks for your priceless information. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to help out. I hope that I've been helpful today. Just 2 minutes left in the stream, so if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to ask now. I will just talk about a couple other things. So firstly, our Discord server link is in the description. That's where you can talk to myself and other weather enthusiasts about what's going on with this cyclone and other weather across the world. We're going to be making a video this evening on the system, and we are likely going to do another stream tomorrow morning regarding the system up until landfall. We'll just have to see if there's time for that. I personally won't be able to host it. We'll see if someone else can. If worst comes to worst, we will just have a video or an automated stream of some sort up, but still, that's definitely there. And yeah, with all that, we also make videos on United States severe weather, global tropical cyclone coverage, hopefully Europe pretty soon. We have a lot down the pipeline here. Someone saying, what time will you be live next? So as of now, the anticipation is that we'll be live tomorrow morning. I don't know that for sure, but we're also going to be producing videos with information. So that'll be good as well. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on our videos. You can subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications in order to do that. But hopefully we'll be live tomorrow evening. If so, that'll be scheduled on the YouTube channel. All right, well, with that being said, I hope all of you did enjoy the stream. If you did, you can hit the like button down below that tells us that we're doing something right. At the same time, if you want to see more of this and you want to be notified, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Again, there's a link in the description below for our Discord server, so you can join our weather community over there. And beyond that, I hope that all of you stay safe out there, you're prepared for this system, and we will keep you up to date with videos at the very least over the next day or two, and if possible, live streams as well. Thanks again for watching. We hope to see you in our next piece of